It's March 6th, 2001, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
The defence offered by Napster to the legal challenges from angry music executives which had plagued it since it launched was that it was simply a tool which could be used for all manner of innocent means beyond the illicit swapping of MP3s. A defence that was put to the test today in history in 2001 when the platform was forced to remove all copyrighted material from its service.
Yes, well, this was a clarification, really, that happened on this day by the US District Judge Marilyn Hall Patel, because at a previous trial, Napster had been told that they needed to remove all copyrighted material within 3 days. And their original defense to that was like, how could we do that? How could we find that material? How would we know what was copyrighted and what isn't, even though it's clearly labelled Madonna in the search engine? So at this trial, the judge was like, okay, well, you have to remove all copyrighted material within 3 days of being notified of a copyright breach by the music industry. So the new thing was, after today, the record industry can tell you, these are the files of ours, and you need to get rid of them.
Yeah, I mean, there'd been so many of these cases that Napster had been batting away, the first of which had come from the metal band Metallica, who, after discovering that their song I Disappear was circulating on Napster, before its official release, that was the thing that really riled them up, they filed a suit against the company alleging vicarious copyright infringement, and that was followed by a similar case led by Dr. Dre, the hip-hop artist. But eventually what brought Napster to this moment was this really pivotal lawsuit led by the Recording Industry Association of America, the RIA, for $20 billion. And it became known as A&M Records Inc. versus Napster Inc. And it unfolded over a good 2 years. And eventually the court just decided to dismiss Napster's assertions of A, fair use, and B, then its proposal for a payment system to compensate record labels while allowing it to just keep going. You know, we can just keep sort of doing what we're doing until we sort this out between us. And instead, the judge ruled very much in favour of the recording industry, and so pretty much the game was up by today.
Yeah, I mean, actually, later on, Napster would try and pay off the settlements they owed to the record labels by converting to a subscription system. They had basically just invented Spotify, but it was too soon. Usage dropped off precipitously because, of course, at this point, the user base had become used to just being able to find whatever tracks they wanted. That was what scared the music industry so much. Napster had been around for less than 2 years, and pretty much that entire time it had been dogged by these legal complaints. But in that short time, they had radically changed the way a whole generation of people thought of music and the value of music and where you go to access music.
Yeah, and this was a product that was authentically and genuinely grassroots spearheaded by that generation. You know, it came to Shawn Fanning, the concept for Napster, when he was still just 18 years old and enrolled at Northeastern University in Boston. He follows the Silicon Valley template of dropping out of university to follow his big business idea when he has one. Although, as we've established, this wasn't a great business idea, as it just ended up with being sued for tens of millions of dollars. So he would be, the origin story says, listening to his roommate complaining incessantly about the difficulties of downloading music online. This was a generation who realised that they had the tools to share MP3s amongst them, but there was no system that was offering it because it was so costly to have a centralized file server that would host thousands of albums. And he came up with the idea based on that of peer-to-peer sharing.
Yeah, so the other part of his big idea was this cataloging system that would basically scour a user's hard drive for their MP3 files, which could then be shared through free downloadable software. And that downloadable software would be this peer-to-peer system that combined the file sharing capabilities of Microsoft Windows and the simplicity of modern search engines to allow people to do exactly this, to kind of put music out there on the internet and have other people who were just innocently passing by be able to go, well, I like that song by Madonna. I think I'll have it on my device for absolutely nothing. And he actually met his co-founder, Shawn Parker, in a chat room. And the name Napster actually came from the screen name that Fanning used in hacker chat rooms.
And the interesting thing looking back is that at the time they didn't seem to have any consciousness that there could be a legal problem around this service. I mean, even in the year 2000, when Fanning appeared on the cover of Time magazine, there was a profile of him in the story, and he describes how he was met with skepticism over the idea from family and friends, but not because of the legality and the copyright issues, but because, quote, it's a selfish world and nobody wants to share. But there was no sense that this was going to be a huge legal problem, and that was because previous case law in the United States had established a differentiation between making and distributing copies of copyrighted content for commercial purposes or for personal use. The idea being that they didn't want the record industry coming after people who were, sharing a CD with a friend. But the digital era, as we've seen time and time again, bringing up completely unprecedented scenarios, because before you had lending your friend your Black Sabbath CD and a guy flogging videos on the street corner. Here, the users of Napster weren't receiving payment for sharing the files, so it wasn't a commercial service in that sense.
Yes. The precedent that Napster used when it first came to court was one that we've actually talked about in the show before, Sony versus Universal. So you might remember this was about the launch of Betamax. Sony, which made Betamax, had argued against Universal in their capacity as a film company that allowing people to tape their films off the telly wasn't problematic because it was for personal use, and yes, they might share them with their friends and family, but that's as far as it would go, and they'd won on that basis. But as you're suggesting, in Napster's case, it was enabling not just occasional use, like a VCR, but uninhibited use of an infinite catalogue. And crucially, as I mentioned earlier, a searchable catalogue. You could just type in the artist and song, and it would find what you wanted.
And it grew so incredibly quickly. By the autumn of 1999, word of mouth alone had helped Napster's catalogue of downloadable songs reach 4 million, with 150,000 registered users. And by the summer of just the next year, 20 million people were logged on, basically because everyone had said, by the way, everyone, you can get free music online now. And the service then peaked at an estimated 80 million users. And in October of 2000, the now 19-year-old coder Shawn Fanning was heralded as a pioneer in computing in that Time magazine interview that you mentioned. They said Napster already ranks among the greatest internet applications ever, up there with email and instant messaging.
And some recording artists liked it too. I mean, understandably, because of the multi-million-dollar lawsuits, people focus on the ones who didn't, like Metallica and Dr. Dre. But Chuck D from Public Enemy saw it as the public reclaiming music. Wyclef Jean liked it. Peter Gabriel liked it so much he was inspired to launch his own startup file-sharing service. Alanis Morissette said she felt that it helped artists because it boosted interest in ticket sales. Although that's maybe easier to say when you've already sold about 1 billion CDs in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, but obviously music executives tended to fall very much on the anti-side. And not only were they angry, of course, but they were kind of baffled and afraid. The co-chairman of Atlantic Records Group, Val Azzoli, said at the time, it's not just music I'm worried about, it's all intellectual properties. If you can take music, you can take everything else too, which actually turns out to very much be the case.
Prescient.
Yes, extremely prescient. But a next generation of those peer-to-peer file sharing services like uTorrent and LimeWire, they would learn from Napster's downfall and operate using a more decentralized model in which they only provided the ability to download files. So they could say, we are not hosting anything, we're not pointing people to any copyrighted materials. And this made that next generation of services much harder to police. And that was the era when individual people were being threatened with lawsuits, for downloading music. But of course, that wasn't feasible on a mass scale. The genie was really out of the bottle by that point.
With his hacker hat on, that must have pleased Fanning enormously to see things grow up in the wake of the thing that he created, which got shut down, that did kind of the thing that he had in mind. But I'm sure simultaneously he must have been thinking, oh man, I was sitting on a gold mine. If only I'd worked out how to turn it into actual Spotify.
In fact, Daniel Ek, who co-founded Spotify in 2006, said that the idea was directly inspired by his love of Napster and trying to recreate the magic of that experience. He'd actually briefly been the CEO of uTorrent, one of the other file-sharing platforms.
Had he?
Yeah, until 2014. Spotify itself, I don't even remember this, it was a peer-to-peer sharing model. It didn't become that centralized server system until 2014. So really, it was directly the descendant of Napster, uTorrent, all those services.
Hello to everyone listening on Spotify right now.
Yeah. Completely legally, without fear of legal action.
For free. You're welcome.
And so another week of retrospecting ends. But next week begins a day early at CLUB Retrospectors. Join us now to get an exclusive episode every Sunday. Patreon.com/retrospectors.